Seja bem-vindo, seja bem-vinda a mais um webinar da Edubrix. Hoje eu tenho muito orgulho de apresentar aqui para vocês uma novidade, né? A gente vai estar nesse episódio desse webinar, a gente vai estar entrevistando uma pessoa de grande relevância aí no mundo da indústria da tecnologia voltada para a educação corporativa, que é o senhor John Kleeman, fundador de uma empresa especializada no processo de avaliação de conhecimento, certificação de conhecimento, voltado para a educação corporativa, voltado para compliance, para certificação de conhecimento, e atuando no mundo inteiro. Hoje, sendo a tecnologia escolhida por grandes fabricantes de software, como, por exemplo, Microsoft, SAP, Oracle e outras. E agora, com a disponibilidade de atuar também na América Latina, sendo que no final dessa entrevista você vai conhecer um pouco mais sobre essa novidade. E eu gostaria, nesse momento, de pedir para você avisar os seus pares, os seus conhecidos, o seu network, de uma forma geral, dessa novidade, né, que você vai assistir nessa entrevista, que eu vou colocar agora para você assistir. Hoje o webinar vai ser super objetivo, super rápido, uma entrevista com muitas sugestões bacanas para você que se interessa por esse assunto, né, de como verificar que uma determinada audiência, um determinado público, seja dentro da minha empresa, ou seja, a cadeia estendida como clientes, parceiros, fornecedores, como é que eu tenho certeza que este público realmente domina, conhece as políticas, procedimentos, as tecnologias, os produtos que eu comercializo. Então, gostaria só de, antes de iniciar aqui a nossa entrevista que a gente preparou para você, eu gostaria de pedir para que você se inscreva no nosso canal, que você dê um like, um joinha se você estiver assistindo pelo YouTube, ou que você interaja com a nossa página do LinkedIn, se você está assistindo pelo LinkedIn ou pelo Facebook. Esse engajamento ajuda as plataformas a entregarem o nosso conteúdo para pessoas que têm um perfil parecido com o seu. E se você está aqui consumindo esse conteúdo, significa que isso pode fazer diferença para você. E tem dicas excelentes do Sr. John Kleeman, que é um especialista nesse assunto de avaliação de conhecimento, que podem servir para você alavancar o seu projeto de educação corporativa, o seu projeto de capacitação de pessoas, de uma forma simples e objetiva, porque muitas vezes a gente se depara com aquele paradigma de conteúdo em vídeo e uma avaliação com múltipla escolha, conteúdo em vídeo, avaliação múltipla escolha. Eu queria que você, nesses 15, 18 minutos que vai ter essa entrevista, você preste atenção um pouquinho nas ideias, nas sugestões, nos temas que o Sr. John Kleeman está colocando como novidades ou novas fronteiras desse processo de avaliação, principalmente no que diz respeito a gente parar de deixar de avaliar se as pessoas lembram de coisas que hoje estão disponíveis a um Google de distância, e a gente começar a focar mais em como as pessoas aplicam conhecimento, como elas julgam, como elas decidem, como elas analisam, como elas sumarizam, como elas analisam. Então, a gente está elevando um pouco o degrau dessa conversa, e eu acho que é importante você que está consumindo, para você que está consumindo esse material, com certeza você já está pensando nisso, você já está fazendo isso. Talvez essa conversa aqui vai te ajudar a ter mais insights, mais ideias de como isso pode melhorar o seu processo, o seu projeto, para que você chegue mais próximo dos resultados esperados. Tenho certeza que você vai curtir muito essa entrevista. Vamos lá. Bem-vindo ou bem-vinda a mais um webinar da Edubrix. Hoje falaremos sobre avaliação de conhecimento
como a avaliação de conhecimento pode estar no centro da estratégia de gestão de talentos. Hoje a gente vai ter um convidado especial, que é o Sr. John Kleeman, da Question Mark. Ele é vice-presidente executivo de Relações com a Indústria e Desenvolvimento de Negócios. E a Question Mark, que é uma empresa Learnosity, é um grupo, é uma referência quando se trata, referência no mundo, quando se trata de avaliação de conhecimento. Ele fundou a Question Mark e também atuou como diretor da ATP, Association of Test Publishers, sendo o presidente da ATP na gestão 2021. O Sr. Kleeman trabalhou ativamente no comitê que criou padrões da indústria de educação corporativa, como o AICC, que foi a base para o SCORM, e também o padrão de interface de questões QTI. É importante você ficar aqui conosco até o final desse evento, porque temos uma novidade para compartilhar. Sr. Kleeman.
Okay, and I'm very pleased to be here with you, Julio. Yeah, so my background is in technology, and a long time ago, over 30 years ago, I founded the Question Mark company that specializes in testing and assessment. And I actually wrote the first version of the software back in the late 80s. And then I set up the company to use the software and sell it and develop it. And over the years, we've been used very, very heavily in corporate learning and certification and in compliance. And we're one of the leading software in the world for delivering assessments.
Quais as melhores práticas atualmente em relação a garantir que todos no time dominem procedimentos, políticas e outras informações críticas para o negócio? Como garantimos que uma avaliação online pode ser consistente e suficiente para medir o domínio de conhecimento sobre determinado assunto?
Okay, well, there are lots of different ways of thinking about this, but one way of thinking about it is that if you're delivering some sort of compliance training or other kinds of training, then there are really three ways in which you can think about how to document that you've done it and make sure you have done it. So you might just document who comes to the training courses, make a list of people there. But the trouble with that is that they might just be looking out the window, they might not be paying attention, and you don't really know that they are fully aware. Another thing that people do sometimes is to have people sign that they've attended the course or that they understand the training. Maybe they sign that they've read the manual and they're going to follow it. And that is better, but it still involves just acknowledging it. They might still not understand, or they might just say, "Oh, well, of course I'll sign it," but they haven't really done it. But the best way, I mean, you'd expect me to say this because we're an assessment company, but it is genuinely the best way, is to test people, because then you can check their understanding, and if there are any issues, anything they haven't understood, then you can follow up with remedial training. So I do think assessments are very, very useful for checking that people understand compliance. I mean, a few other things that's worth thinking about are spacing out the learning. People remember things better if it happens over time. So if you have 3 sessions over 3 weeks, that's better than one long session in 1 week. And there are other things you can do, like, for example, getting people to learn by do or to have retrieval practice. So that's sort of the answer to the first bit of your question. Potentially, I could go on to talk about how you can ensure that an online assessment will be consistent and enough to measure knowledge mastery. Shall I go on with that? Yes. So I think here it's a question of following good practice in assessments. So firstly, you need to define what you mean by mastery. So you've got to define what it is that somebody needs to know about the job or the subject. And that can change quite quickly because jobs are changing a lot at the moment because of technology and different business practices. One thing which a lot of people do is something called a job task analysis, which is a survey you give people to identify what it is they do in the job. So say, for example, you're trying to test nurses, then you would survey lots of nurses to discover what things they do, how much is patient care, how much is deciding what medicine to give people, how much is other things. And then depending on that, you can build a blueprint for your test. And once you've done that, worked out what the blueprint for the test is, then you've got to go through the process of writing the questions, getting subject matter experts and reviewing those questions well, then putting together assessments that cover the blueprint with the right number of questions for the different topics. And you pilot it, you make sure you sort out the pass score, the cut score, sometimes it's called, as to how people pass or fail. And then when you're running it, you need to review and look at things like the item analysis. And another thing which is increasingly important nowadays is to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there's increasing understanding you need to make your tests fair for everybody and to think about people who might not be native speakers, who have accessibility challenges. So that's a very short answer to quite a complicated question.
Você poderia descrever como o segmento de TI mantém o conhecimento de colaboradores, parceiros e clientes alinhados com o negócio? E como essas empresas lidam com as atualizações constantes de produto? Existe alguma forma de descentralizar o processo de autoria de questões, criando um ambiente onde todos os experts possam colaborar?
Okay, well, obviously there are lots of ways that they do that. There's a lot of communication things, but one area that I know quite a lot about is certification. So certification is when an IT company produces a range of different certifications about knowledge of its programs, knowledge of its skills, knowledge of the competencies, and people take these certifications and then they can put some qualifications after their name. And this whole area of IT certification is quite widely used, and there's a lot of strength. It's really is a very lot of positive feedback here. But for individuals, if you take a certification, you're showing your competence, you're demonstrating achievement. People like to have certifications to be able to prove what they can do, and sometimes maybe you get better paid if you have a certification in, say, Microsoft or SAP or some other technology. And if you're a partner of the organization, then you can stand out from the crowd. I mean, often if you're a partner of a big IT company, you're required to take some certifications, but it allows you to demonstrate your competence. And if you have plenty of certifications, it's easier to win business because you can say, look, I can do this project because the IT company has certified me to do that. And there's a lot of evidence that people who have been certified tend to be more productive in their job, and also that the projects are more effective. There's an organization called the ITCC, which is involved in IT certification. I think it's the IT Certification Council, and they produce evidence about the value of certification. And there's a lot of evidence from lots of different companies and countries that certification does improve productivity and project success. But of course, in the IT industry, as you said in your question, there's a lot of very fast changes. Software changes every few months, and what was sort of valuable and useful 2 years ago may be less valuable today. And so I think what some different organizations have different approaches here. Some organizations, rather than having a big bang, one exam that gives you a certification for a long time, have a series of smaller credentials or micro credentials. Also, some organizations have what they call delta exams, which just give you an exam to test you on the changes that have been. The other side of this is if you're using technology to create and deliver the exams, you need to be able to use very agile techniques because software is coming all the time, changing all the time. You need to be able to update the exam often, and the internet and sort of software as a service type tools like Question Mark are really useful for that because you can just change the questions in your browser. Yes, no, I mean, so I think it used to be, at least in Europe and the US, that there was a lot of in-person item writing workshops. So you've got experts together in the same room to write the items. And that, of course, still happens a bit. But already before the pandemic, there was a lot of virtual collaboration. So people doing item writing over the internet, either in a sort of Zoom type meeting or else just working asynchronously. And I think we've seen more of that following the pandemic, when obviously everybody had to work at home. And by the way, if you're wondering, this is my home office in London. Before I before the pandemic, I used to go into an office in the center of London, England, every day. But then when the pandemic came, I moved to my attic room here, and here I've stayed ever since. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people. So subject matter.
Time, sorry to interrupt. How much
Sure.
time did you spend in this work home commuting? How much time a day?
Well, I used to spend maybe 3/4 of an hour every day each way, so maybe at least an hour and a half a day. But now I just walk upstairs.
Great.
And with Zoom and other technologies, I can work with people around the world, and that's very, very exciting. But of course, knowledge changes really fast in IT, so you do need to be able to update the exam. And so we're seeing a lot of people using web tools like question mark on demand, both for creating questions and then for reviewing them. And it can be really very, very effective that way. And you're using people's time wisely. And it's hard to get subject matter experts' time. Your experts are very valuable. They're doing other things. And so being able to have them virtually author and virtually review is really valuable.
Como as áreas de treinamento e desenvolvimento se organizam para ter certeza que os profissionais realmente dominam o conhecimento mínimo necessário para executar os seus papéis?
So that's a very, very big question. Let me give you a fairly short answer to it. One thing is that with people increasing understanding that people learn informally as much as formally. I mean, you're probably familiar with the 70-20-10 model, where people learn 70% of things on the job, 20% from peers, and only 10% from formal learning. And also there's increasingly people leave and move to different jobs. And so in a job for a smaller time, you kind of need tests, because a lot of people will know some of the things you need to know, but not everything. And you need tests, diagnostic or other tests, to identify what people know and what they need training in. So we see a lot of tests in onboarding, where people where you test people on a whole series of different things as they join the organization, and you can work out what training they need. Another thing is that so people often need skills, not knowledge nowadays, because knowledge you can Google and look up. So it's really important to think about, when you're testing people, test about the skills. We have a concept. Sometimes we talk about testing above knowledge. So you can ask people if they know a fact, but that's not so useful, because you can Google facts, but do they understand how to apply, or can they apply the knowledge, or can they evaluate or synthesize or analyze different pieces of information, put them together? So it can be, if you really want to check whether people are mastering what they need to perform, then you may want to think about questions, and they can just be either very cleverly written multiple choice questions, or else questions with charts, or matching or ranking questions that allow them to check that they are understanding and applying knowledge, not just having it. Another thing that we see is that people do observational tests. So you have, for example, a practical thing, like a salesperson with a customer, or else a engineer trying to fix some equipment, or else somebody in the medical world. You can observe them doing it, and the observer or instructor has a sort of tablet or other checklist online, and they tick through, does the person know what they're doing, do they prepare properly, that kind of thing. And another area we're seeing is a lot of performance testing, where people actually do practical tasks. For example, in IT, you can have people actually run through things in a virtual machine and then assess whether they've done them right or not at the end. And often you want to be measuring what people are doing, not just measuring knowledge. That makes sense. So a really key part of a lot of people's jobs is to make decisions, to make judgments. And there's a concept called situational judgment questions, whereby you put people in a situation. It can often be a sort of dilemma, or some area where things are a little bit ambiguous. And what should you do? And then you can ask either just a multiple choice question, what's the best thing here, or sometimes it can be deeper to say what's the best of these different options, or what's the worst. Choose the best and the worst. For example, you might have a situation that maybe you are working in a bank, and one of the senior executives at the bank comes in and tells you to ignore the procedure and just sign this person up as a customer. So in some banks, that would be a big red flag because you haven't followed the compliance organizations. And so you might ask a judgment question. What do you do? Do you say no? Do you say yes? Do you say, please, can I speak to my manager? Do you ask to get the instruction in writing, or something like that? So the right answer might vary from different organizations, but by putting people in these dilemmas and asking questions there, if you're interested, there is a white paper on the question mark website on situational judgments that explains a lot about how to do that. It is in English, I'm afraid, but probably Google Translate would do a reasonable job of translating it.
Já existe alguma tecnologia capaz de traduzir automaticamente as questões para outros idiomas? Essa pergunta é para os nossos clientes multinacionais.
So that's a really good question. And I think it's not just global companies that need to deal with that. I mean, I don't know what the situation is in Brazil, but in a lot of countries, there are people who do not speak the native language. Like in America, for example, about 20% of the population don't speak English at home. And that's a lot of countries have people there. So if you want to be fair in your tests, you might want to think about whether you want to deliver the test in, say, Spanish or another language as well. So there are a number of different approaches here. One approach is to translate the exam fully into the other language, and that is the gold standard, as it were, the best thing to do. Generally, what you do there is you want to take the question text and export it out of the assessment system and send it to a translation company. Because translation companies have machine translation memories, and other things to do that. So if you're using question mark on demand, we have a way of exporting from the platform into XML format that translators can understand. They translate it and send it back in. So that's one approach. Another approach we have is to have machine translation during delivery. So when you take a test, you can translate the question using immediate translation. Now, that isn't going to be as good quality because, as I'm sure you're familiar, machine translation can give errors. But if it's a low or medium stakes test, that may be acceptable. And that's particularly useful if, say, maybe people have a good knowledge. Maybe the test is in Portuguese and they know Portuguese, but they don't know it perfectly. And so maybe they come across a phrase, I'm not sure what that phrase is, then you click on it and you see a translation. And that's a capability within Question Mark On Demand called Instant Translate that we've just brought out and actually won an award this year. So those are the two of the main approaches for dealing with translating exams.
Então, estamos agora caminhando para o final de mais um webinar da Edubrix. Gostaria de agradecer o seu clima e avisar também para você que está consumindo esse podcast que a gente está promovendo agora a parceria entre a Edubrix e a Question Mark para trazer os produtos da Question Mark para o Brasil. Se a sua empresa tem algum desafio relacionado à avaliação de conhecimento, certificação, compliance, entre em contato para conversarmos sobre esse assunto.
So thank you, Julio, for giving me the opportunity to be on this webinar. We're very, very pleased to be working with Edubrix. We look forward to a long partnership with Edubrix and Question Mark and customers in Latin America who will be able to use assessments. And it's my passionate belief that assessments are extremely valuable in the corporate and other worlds. And I hope you manage to get lots of benefit from assessments via Question Mark and Edubrix, and we look forward to working with you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Kleeman, and thank you for watching us. Bye-bye, and have a nice time.